Hi folks, and welcome to your feedback video for writing to analyse. We have got 6 texts here that have been submitted. Here they all are on my computer. I'm going to go through them, going to talk to you about what's good and what we could improve. Colour coding is an issue here. We have 3 different colours. We have blue, that's language issues, so linguistic issues specifically. We have green, that's idiomatic issues. What does that mean? It means stuff that's like linguistically correct but doesn't really sound natural, doesn't sound idiomatic. Then we've got yellow, and yellow is great because yellow is just bang. I love it. Great stuff. Keep it up. All right. So they're the different types of annotation we have on the document. Let's get straight into it. Vincent's up first. He begins with a very bold, I think we're on a sinking boat. This is a big metaphor to start the email. Now, when we're using metaphors, we should be careful to get the right one. Generally speaking, we say on a sinking ship, not a sinking boat in English. Not a big deal, but we may as well get it right. And I think that it's a good idea to use metaphor and generally figurative language rather than purely literal language when we're writing here. I mean, you may think, okay, analysis is about specific like numerical trends and processes, and therefore you should stick to literal language. However, you're still dealing with people, and even if you're talking about something which is a quantitative event, it's a person who's going to get that information and act on it. So there's always going to be a question of sort of human perception in the mix when we're writing to analyse. And I think that the use of figurative language is good. We've got to get it right, though. Now, whether we should open the email with, boom, we're on a sinking ship, that's debatable because let's just think about the PCAF element here, purpose, content, audience, form. So our purpose here is writing to analyse, okay? And we can't really control that. That's not really in our direct control. The purpose and the audience is always something you can only control indirectly. And in this case, by beginning the email in this quite dramatic way, I wonder whether that's going to help us provide analysis, or does it feel like more of a persuasive email? Is it generally designed to elicit emotion rather than sort of cool, rational analysis? So I think that in terms of achieving the purpose, this might not be the right move, maybe, to start the email. But let's see. There are things we can do. I think this is a positive second sentence in the email. I should say, guys, I'm not going to comment on every single sentence of every single text here. That would take too long. I've been through these texts and I've sort of picked out specific parts I want to talk about. So in the next paragraph from Vincent, we have a few issues with commas. Now in German, commas always come before das. You always have to have a comma in front of it. In English you don't, but it's very understandable why you would put one in there. So I'm just going to start taking some notes on maybe the things we need to work on. Linguistic competence, commas could be an issue for us, but we'll see. And now I have a couple of structural points about this paragraph from Vincent. He says in the second sentence, it shows us that the market leader is also facing the same problem. But I'm not entirely clear what that problem is at this stage in the email. Of course, Vincent knows, and I know because I made the simulation, but would the reader know at this page? Would it be so blindingly obvious what the problem is that you can just say the problem? If so, I would argue that probably the person wouldn't have emailed us asking for our analysis if the answer is so obvious. So I think that rather than just saying the same problem, we would have to define what the problem is first. Another interesting point is where we say here, one special merge opportunity with Blockbuster sounds reasonable. I will get to that at the end of this email. So as I've commented here, that kind of creates a sense of suspense. You know, don't worry, I'll get to it later. It's a good rhetorical device in a text to use suspense. But again, we have to look at the purpose we're trying to analyse here. And does creating suspense serve the purpose of analysis, or is that more going to be creating a persuasive, emotional connection to the text? I mean, there's no right or wrong answer about this. I just want you to be aware of it. I think that possibly here we shouldn't be trying to create too much suspense, and we should certainly be clear, like, don't assume too many ideas or problems or concepts are already already in your reader's head. Otherwise, you risk talking past each other. What we're talking about here is strategic competence, and it's all about assessing the reader's awareness in your text. So I'm just going to write here in strategic competence is reader awareness. That we carefully consider how aware our reader may be of the various things that we're talking about. A bit more of a language thing here, then we'll move on to the next paragraph. It's like merging two boats. I had to add this in Vincent. We need a apostrophe here because we are creating a contraction. It is a contraction of two words, it is. So we take it is, we take out the, so normally like this, we take out the space, we indicate that a space used to be there with an apostrophe. So that's how it, now apostrophes are also used for denoting possession in English. And it's a bit, the whole thing is a bit complicated. I won't get into it now. But here we need one because we're talking about a contraction. I think that's only a couple of times that came up, so no big deal. So what Vincent's done here is he's actually included his own graphics and some of my graphics here from the simulation. Now, this seems like a good idea, right? Because if you have the graph and you are working off the graph, why not just show the graph to the person you're trying to provide the analysis for? My concern is that analysis is about changing data into information and ultimately into insights or knowledge, right? There's a difference between looking at a table of numbers and somebody saying to you what that table means. And my concern is here that the reader of this email might feel a little bit shortchanged because they think, well, you know, I wanted you to sort of do the thinking and explain to me what this stuff means, not just show me the materials that you're using. Now, the argument on the other hand is saying, well, no, but this is the boss we're talking to, and he or she should be given the chance to reach his or her own conclusions. So just simply present the information or present the data and let them reach the conclusion. But then they've asked you to do the analysis. So I think we need to be comfortable with the fact that when we're analysing, we do have a degree of power. They're saying, you do the thinking, I trust your judgment, and then tell me what to do. But we should express those recommendations that we end up with in cautious language that shows we have the data here, that's the fact, and from these facts we have these approaches, these recommendations, these ideas. That is our interpretation of the data, and what we're going to propose that's not factual. I can't say for a fact that my proposal will work, but I can say based on this data, from my experience and my knowledge, this is what we should do, and this could work. Hedging the statements then. So I think including the actual graphs is not really what we want to do. That's more explaining the situation. It's not so much offering the deeper analysis. A couple of linked language things now. Whenever we have the opportunity to reduce the amount of words, I think that's always a good idea. So by saying non-illegal, let's just write legal. And then we can save ourselves a little bit of space. Every opportunity in analysis is about being as efficient as you can. This is discourse competence. I'm going to write here linguistic efficiency. Getting a lot of content said with very few words is the way forward here. So even a tiny thing like that, take out a word, just leave one word rather than two, take every single opportunity. What I like now is this sentence that Vincent said. I think this could be a reasonable approach. Double hedging there, could rather than just is. Not this is, but this could be, and a reasonable approach. Reasonable, angemessen in German, it is inherently a moderating word. It changes this from being 100% certainty to a understandable, comprehensible, reasonable alternative. And then we have some good use of business for language here. We could shift our business away. Of course, you could say move our business away, but shift sounds a bit more business, a bit more dynamic. Away from the physical area into a more online orientated business. I wouldn't say physical area. I'd say the physical context, because we're not talking about an actual physical area. Obviously, we're talking about a context here. So let's just scroll down and look at the last part of Vincent's email here. Here we have the merger with Blockbuster. Now, and this is that surprise, right? This is the kind of the special merger that he talks about at the start. I think that saving it till the end, creating that suspense, that can work quite well. But then when we mention it at the end, we have to make more of it than just slip it quietly into a sentence like it slipped in here. Because otherwise, it's not clear why it is special. And I agree that the merger with Blockbuster is a bold, radical suggestion. So selling it as, look, I have a special idea, but I'm only going to come to it later. It's maybe not a bad idea because it's radical. You don't want to just like slam it in the reader's face in the first paragraph of your email. However, when you then come to explain it, it need the weighting that the reader has done, that sense of suspense, there needs to be a payoff. It needs to seem like, oh yeah, okay, I get why you were waiting with that. That's a bold call, but I like it, right? So I think we probably need to make a bit more of that there. So overall, very interesting points raised by this text from Vincent, and it does cut to the core of what it means to analyse. And I think that at this early stage in the semester, we shouldn't worry too much if what I did in my example text is different from what you're doing. Where I'm trying to get us all on the same page and what it means to create a text that achieves a certain purpose for a certain reader. Always back to PCAF. And everyone's got pre-configured ideas about what these purposes mean. This could, in some people's eyes, absolutely be an analysis. I'm not criticising it for that. But what I want for you on this module is something more linguistic, where the writer takes on the sort of analytical role and actually converts the data that I will provide you in the simulations to something more easily digestible for the reader. Okay, thank you very much for submitting that, Vincent. Let's move now to Greta's text. Instantly, we have a completely different approach here, but it's also very creditable. It's a really great email. So I don't want you to think that there's one way of doing this and that's my way or the highway, right? I'm very much open to seeing lots of different suggestions here. What I like about Greta's email, it's short, but you can kind of tell from just looking at the sentence length, looking at the way she structured it, that she's covered a lot of ground content-wise. I think that when I look at this email, I instantly get a sense that the linguistic inefficiency seems to be where it should be in Greta's text. Let's take a look though. Straight away, we have an interesting introduction. I'm glad to hear that the board is open to new suggestions. I think this is pitched just right. There's a subtle critique that the board has been somewhat closed, but it is subtle and you're not openly saying it. You know, I've had other submissions where people have started saying, great, the board is finally going to do something. It's too much. Step back from that. If it was so blindingly obvious to you the board should have done something, then why didn't you say something earlier? Would be the question that your boss would ask. This is nicely balanced. Now is the time to act. Yep, I'm into this email already. It's motivating me. I have consulted my team, or consulted with my team. My instinct here was to say consulted with my team, but then I realised that's not any more correct than without with. Both are fine. The difference is if you consult somebody, that suggests that you just have a brief chat with them. You ask them what they think. If you consult with somebody, that suggests much deeper level of discussion has gone on. So I think in this case, consulted with my team might just have a slightly better. It might fit this context slightly better, but this is very detailed stuff. So then we have use of text level formatting in the form of headings which are in bold and which are numbered. I like it because it means that as a reader I can access this text at multiple levels. If I don't have time to read the whole thing, I can just jump to point 2 because I can see at a glance that's what interests me at this point. So reader availability. How likely your reader is to sit down and actually read your text carefully. That is a big question. We imagine, don't we, that our reader's going to sit there with their laptop and devote full attention to the text, and as they well should do, because you've spent a lot of time writing this text. But what if they don't? And if you're writing an email for your boss, there's a good chance that he or she won't do that. So what are you going to do? Are you going to write it in such a way you have to read it right from the start to the beginning? And if the boss doesn't take the time, well, that's their fault. No, you're not going to do that. You want to make it accessible at multiple levels, and that's what you achieve by using text level formatting, as Greta has done here, so I like it. I also like here the decrease in DVD rentals coupled with an increase in paid downloads. What Greta's doing is taking two different trends, which on the surface are not particularly related, and then bringing them together to reveal a hidden connection, which then makes everything make sense. And to do it straight up in bold, in clear, simple language as the heading, that instantly, it paints the whole picture for the reader. That's what I mean about impressive levels of linguistic efficiency. That's how we achieve it. So this is a really great paragraph. I just want to talk about a couple of points. Although this trend seems to be taking off slowly, we do have some tense issues here, guys. You know that English has these continuous tenses for things that are happening right now. We have the present simple tenses for things that happen generally. This is a trend which is taking off slowly. It doesn't take off slowly. That would mean it permanently takes off slowly, and that doesn't make semantic sense. So it needs to be taking off slowly. And then we have the data clearly shows that the majority of viewers. I like this sentence. I've made it yellow because Greta is linking up a assumption with data, or rather she's backing up an assumption, because she says the majority of viewers are inclined to watch movies at home and on demand. Now that's not a fact, we don't know that, but the data does indicate it. And linking or locating the kind of authority of that statement in data makes the statement believable. Linking, this is the difference. There's a fact, and here's my interpretation of it. The word clearly is totally fine here, I think, although you've got to be careful, because we want to hedge our statements. We don't want to be too 100% convinced if we're not sure, but here you can be. Here's a good example of hedging. Most likely, there will always be a certain percentage. We don't know that for sure, but it seems likely, and we're analysing here. We're not being, this isn't some kind of legal statement or something. We are supposed to be giving our probable ideas based on our experience and hedging them so that the reader knows, okay, that's just an idea, whereas that's a fact. Nicely done. Let's just move to the end now. This is all really well written, by the way. So I really enjoyed reading it. Thank you for submitting. Final part, we have a couple of points where I would maybe make a change. I'm certain, it says here, we could negotiate a deal with them by leveraging our game rental sales. First of all, great business English. Negotiate a deal, leveraging game rental sales. So using the game rental as a lever to kind of improve your own position. Great business vocab. I just wonder whether we should include the word certain. Is it going too much? I'm very confident we could achieve, or I feel strongly that we could achieve. There's various gradations of certainty that we could use there that would just take the edge off that. Because if this goes wrong, and then your boss says, but you said you were certain it would work, why give your boss the chance to say that later? So maybe there's an argument for backing that statement down a bit. Finally, please present these findings. You had those, these and those. Man, oh, difficult in English. This and that, these and those. Oh, it is a properly complicated thing, which lots of people I know always make mistakes with, even when they speak English fluently. Please present these findings to the board. That's kind of a bold way to end this. I think that moderating that a bit and saying something like maybe just taking this sentence out and just saying I'm looking forward to hearing how these suggestions are received. I think that is really all we need at the end there. You don't want to be, I mean, it does say please in it, but still there's a certain stringency in saying, or a certain kind of pushiness in saying, please present these to the board. It's your boss you talk to. He unfortunately will decide what he wants to do. Or it could be she, it's an Alex, so it's a he or a she. So yeah, overall, considering the relatively low word count, we're looking at 354 words here. Greta has basically nailed it. And if you can get the key points across in fewer words than somebody else, that means that your emails are shorter, easier to read, quicker, and your boss and your colleagues will appreciate that. And I appreciate it too. So linguistic efficiency gets a double tick, a major part of discourse competence, being able to get to the point and then move on. Great submission, Greta, thank you very much. Now, capitalization in English is a nightmare. In German, it's really easy. In German, you capitalize all nouns. Brilliant idea. Makes everything so easy. In English, it's a bit more tricky. For some reason, no one really knows why, we capitalize the first letter of an email, despite the fact there's a comma before it. You don't do it in German. In German, it's small. In English, it's capitalized. Just got to try and remember that. Now, Dominic's mail is kind of somewhere between. Oh, well, no, it's a little bit longer than Greta's, and it has some of the more rhetorical methods we saw being used in Vincent's as well. It's a really good email, and I'm just going to talk about a few points which I think will be useful for all of us. So, a bit of a language point extensively. I would suggest in-depth for discussion. You don't normally have an extensive discussion, it's an in-depth discussion. This is an issue called collocation, which is where certain words just fit better with other words. So experience can be extensive. You can have extensive experience, but a discussion can't be extensive. A discussion has to be in-depth. There's not really a rule for it. It's just how the language is used. So idiomacy, so how idiomatic something is, or collocation. And extensively doesn't collocate as well with discussion as in-depth does. I know that sounds like a teacher excuse. It's just wrong, but it's kind of how the words are used. So look at this. What is the problem? Why do people, why are people stopping renting DVD? And how can we re-establish the alternative? Bold call to use these big rhetorical questions with bold formatting to structure the email. But I like it. It allows that level of jumping in, just like we have with Greta's, and it really sets out the structure really clearly. My one concern is, could it be that the boss would find it a little bit patronizing or a little bit too simplistic? I don't know. It would depend on the personality of Alex, the boss here. What I think is good is that Alex could pretty much take this text, put it on PowerPoint slides, including that question, and as a PowerPoint slide, that would work great for the board because you have the more sort of rhetorical situation. So I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think it's worth being cautious about. We must differentiate. You had differ. Here's a great sentence. Again, taking multiple ideas and a complex sentence to bring them all together. Government acts on piracy might reduce the impact of the latter, but considering the rise of smartphones, the increasing value of mobility, those legal alternatives surely will gain an even bigger market share. It's just a great sentence. We've got 4 or 5 different factors all being brought together like chess pieces, and then it's a statement which just summarizes the whole situation in a very, very limited number of words. 35 words, which bring it all together. I have seen people take a paragraph or 2 to explain this stuff, and Dominic's done it in 1 sentence. I raise my hat to you, sir. Bit of paragraphic stuff here. Do we need to start a new paragraph here? I wonder. I always find paragraphing, I think that when you have just 1 sentence as a paragraph, I always want to combine it with another sentence or create bullet points. I find here that we could probably just remove this and put this here, and then we'd have a 1 complete paragraph. I would even consider putting this here and making 1 paragraph like that. But I think that's debatable. Content point, I'm not quite sure of... on the one hand, Dominic rules out merging with Blockbuster because it will only slow down the problem and not help us in the long term, which is fair because we know, right, from 2020, we know that Netflix is coming and this is all going to end. But he does then say that setting it up might be expensive, and I think that the synergies with Blockbuster would help there. So be careful not to accidentally include a solution to your argument in your argument. I mean, we have to put ourselves, what were people thinking back then in 2010 or whatever it was. They were not aware of what was happening in the future. It was 2009. Finally then, we've got some great language in the last part of Dominic's mail here. Frankly speaking, it's probably too late for us to jump on the bandwagon of instant paid downloads. It's a rhetorical fallacy. We're going to talk about logical fallacies later in the semester. But to jump on the bandwagon is a great expression, and it implies, obviously, we know what it means. There's like a whole load of people doing something and you just get involved because you think it's cool rather than it being the right thing to do. And I think that to use that kind of expression in this thing, when you do not want them to do that, like it is too late for us to do that, then it is good to argue in this more emotive, more kind of rhetorical way. I think it's great writing. Now, this final part, I was initially slightly confused. The solution Dominic is suggesting is to offer a paid subscription to an online platform. But what he means there is a flat rate subscription rather than pay per film like iTunes. When I initially read this, I said, okay, so we can't copy iTunes here, but then he suggests the solution offering a paid subscription. And so I thought, well, that's iTunes, isn't it? So I think here sometimes you have to be a little bit careful to really explain your suggestions or your proposals in detail, and always think, will the reader be with you? Because I think that it's the pay per film versus flat rate subscription that is the key bit of information that we would need there to make that completely clear. But I don't know. That's just my sort of subjective opinion. So reader awareness, reader availability, reader knowledge, all super important strategic level competences for ensuring your writing gets understood. I hope you can read my mad scrawlings here. Filming and doing this are sort of a bit tricky. We're going to make it though. So overall, Dominic, some really great points in that text. Thank you very much for submitting it. We have 3 more to go from Darian, Niklas and Kaloyan. I'm going to try and speed this up a little bit because I want to get this done in under an hour. So Darian's text is really interesting. I've written here, clear and beautifully written for the introduction, but does it lack a sense of urgency? And spoiler, I think it maybe does. I think that overall, the tone of this text from Darian really feels like a very neutrally, carefully written piece of writing. It reminds me more of an academic paper than an email, because Darian's being very careful just to lay out all of the information and only then, in a calm and clear way, make some suggestions in the latter half of the email. But all of this section is purely describing the situation. And I think that we need to shift the balance a bit here. In order to reduce the word count a bit, and in order to increase the analytical impact of the text, I think we need to include less detail setting out the situation and more quickly get to the really interesting stuff, which I think is, what does the information mean? So again, this is a question of where you're coming from. If you're coming from a perspective that an analysis should be a neutral, clear, more academically toned piece of writing, then this is great. But if we look at our specific situation here, what we're trying to do, I think that you achieve a greater analytical effect by reducing the detail of the explanation and increasing the detail of the analytical insight, which is what I've written here: balance, explanation and analytical insight. I will say though that this is some simply faultless English, so that's great. I just made this whole paragraph yellow because it was really well written, and that's kind of a bitter pill to swallow here, because I'm criticising perfectly written English. That's the thing with communicative competence, it cuts both ways. On the one hand, if you make a few grammar mistakes or something, it doesn't really matter if that doesn't compromise the purpose of your writing or your speech. But if you do some really great English and you write it all out, but it's not really going in the right direction for your audience, for your reader, in terms of achieving the purpose, then you're going to lose out, right? So we have to make sure we're always thinking, right, what is the purpose of the text? What am I trying to do? Doesn't matter at this stage, Darian. This is really well written, and this is the early stage of the semester where we're discovering like what it means to, or what I mean it to analyze here. So this is a great job, but I think it's about just altering that balance slightly. Furthermore, rather than further on at the end, I can't say anything about this because there's no mistakes. So this is sort of faultless. I'm finding the odd tiny spelling mistake here. But the way that Darian has structured his proposals into bullet points makes a lot of sense. This makes them very accessible, which is all the more frustrating because you have to sort of get through all the description first before you get to them. I think that maybe if you wanted to have, I mean, it's a good idea to have this level of detail. If you want to have this level of detail, maybe give a brief overview of the key ideas at the start of the email, then go into a bit more of a detailed policy discussion of all these details, and then come with the full explanation of the proposals. So you might want to actually do the suspense tactic that we saw in the first submission from Vincent, just to kind of make the reader understand that there is going to be insightful stuff coming, but it's going to be after this amount of a certain amount of explanation. The other thing we could talk about as well is meta-structural language. That is language that tells the reader what is going to happen in the email. And I think that is important here. If you're going to have like a lot of description or a lot of explanation, you need to say to the reader, it's essential that we understand all this stuff, even though it's going to take a while, in order we need to get through this stuff. We need to talk about this in order that you can understand. Man, all my stuff's shutting down here because I'm talking for so long. Hang on a minute. Start another one, please. No, wait. Okay. We need that metastructural language. It tells the reader what's going to happen in the text. All right. We could include more of that here. Thank you very much, Darian, for that submission. We continue then with Niklas and then Kaloyan. Okay, let's just power on through these. Niklas, this is a really, really nicely done email. It's also sort of in the mid-range in terms of length, but we have, just like with Greta, 2 main sections, an analysis, then a suggestion. And there's some really nice points I want to tease out of this. First of all, I wouldn't say therefore here. To this end, or in order to achieve this, you could use, but you just don't really need a connective there. You can just go straight into the next part of the email. Overarching is one of my favourite words. If you're using the word overarching, an overarching trend, overarching set of circumstances, it has to be good because we're talking about revealing the hidden connections between different seemingly unrelated events. And a word like overarching is going to link those things up. That's bound to be good. This hypothesis is supported by, I like the way we're using the passive voice to link up ideas, hypothesis with evidence. And I also like it is likely that. That's a nice little bit of hedging, showing that you are making a distinction between opinion and fact. I'm going to put that in our socio-cultural category. Hedge to distinguish opinion from fact. Okay. Here, weekly rental figures per store almost halved. It's good to say almost halved rather than increased by 48%, because you may as well say almost halved. It's a slight rounding up or down of the data, but it's so much easier to read. Go for it. Spelling of customers, this seems to be a thing that everyone gets wrong. It's you, then O. So customers, not costumers. Okay? Don't know why it's still underlining it, but we continue. Then we move on to the suggestion part. I like the way we have hedging used here. An adaptation of our strategy might be the way to improve our situation. And I like that you've framed it as an adaptation of an existing strategy. It's always best if you can find something that's working and then suggest a change to that. That's going to be easier for your reader to grasp or accept than a full-on, everything we've been doing is wrong, we have to completely change it, right? Broaden with an EN. And then here we have another example of just a really great sentence which brings together lots of different elements, and by creating a complex sentence really achieves a lot in terms of linguistic efficiency. On the one hand, we might benefit from a merger because together with Blockbuster, we possibly have enough capital for investment. In addition, Blockbuster already tried to establish a download rental service in the past. That's why they have experience with digital offers and thus knowledge how to establish this. So, yeah, it's hard to explain what I'm after, but it's these kind of sentences and these kind of paragraphs that follow an intuitive logical sequence, put in place different ideas, and then use connectives where required to make it all flow. So the connectives here we have on the one hand, indicating that we're going to then have an additional argument that is signaled by the word in addition, and then we have that is why, which offers then the deeper connection between the two things. I'm guessing that, Niklas, you weren't really consciously thinking about this, you just wrote it, but it's important to understand retrospectively why it works or why it doesn't work. Also so other people can see it as well and replicate the way you've been writing this. I think that the underlining is good. Again, it makes the text accessible for the reader. And overall, this really balances length and depth, I think, really effectively. We're talking about 529 words here. And I have found that 500 to 600 words does tend to be the sweet spot in terms of the length of texts for the simulations we're going to do on this module. I'm not saying it has to be that, but that tends to allow the purpose to be achieved in a length that you know the reader's actually going to read and not be frustrated by. Great submission, Niklas, thank you very much. Okay, finally, from today we have Kaloyan's submission. Also in the same sort of range in terms of length, we can see some text level formatting at the end. We have some bullet points. And I can say I've read the whole thing. This is also really well written. Just a few points I want to tease out before I wind up the video. I'm so glad to hear that the board is ready to implement new strategies. I think that this is just like Greta's intro. If you look back at that one was... I'm glad to hear the board is open to new suggestions. Works well. I think yours works also very well, Kaloyan. To say, I'm so glad to hear the board is ready to implement new strategies. Again, there's a subtle critique. You imply that they have not been ready up until now, but it's subtle. You're not saying it out loud, but you are indicating that there's a sense of urgency and a corner has been turned. You know that your boss will agree with you in this, right? You know that he or she has had the same frustrations. So you're creating a sense of empathy, a sense of connected experience, and you're subtly setting the stage for the context of your email. All that by just choosing that sentence rather than something else. Now then, this massively we can class under why offer too much. We don't need to offer something that increases our revenues massively. What if it's not massive? What if it's just very big? You said it would be massive. People are going to be disappointed. How about substantially? Substantially is a little bit more debatable. What does substantially mean? Certainly, a good big range of figures can be substantial. Anything that's more than it is now basically can be substantial. Massive has to be really massive. So let's not try to over-deliver too much. Capitalization remains an issue here. Game rental, movie rental. I already talked about it, but the deal is this. If you just have nouns, things, table, laptop, chair, they don't get capitalized. DVD movie rental is just a thing. It's not a specific brand, it's not a product. DVD is a specific product, that's why we have to have DVD in capitals, but movie rental isn't, and the same with game rental. So they just get left uncapitalized. Basically, unless you're Donald Trump, who capitalizes random nouns, and that's not helping me teach my English, unless you're Donald Trump, don't capitalize stuff unless you know it's a name, the day of a week, or like a national holiday like Christmas or Easter. Okay, brand names as well, specific product names maybe, but otherwise, if in doubt, leave it small. These are well put together paragraphs. We've got firstly, we've got topic sentences. So we see the sentence introduces the topic of the paragraph as we were discussing in today's lesson. And then the paragraph is about that sentence. It doesn't jump around madly. This is all nicely done. Same with all the other submissions, to be honest. And this last point I like is the big advantages that speak for a merger with Blockbuster. Now, Normally, I would be criticising something like this because this, oh, I'm not sure, I think this could be an example of linguistic interference when your native language, German or whatever, starts interfering with your English language. Dafür sprechen, okay? Was spricht dafür? That is a German expression. And often, when you translate it literally, it doesn't work in English, but this works really well. So, sociolinguistic competence would be linguistic interference. You can make people feel kind of weird if your native language starts messing with your target language. We have to be aware of it as a problem. But this example is actually a really pleasant example where we can take something from German, put it directly into English, and it works really well. Which it does. It sounds nice, and it introduces the last part of the email really well. So that's a nicely done email from you, Kaloyan, as well. And I'd like to thank all 6 people who've submitted this into the public forum. I hope that you've got something from watching this video. We are now going to move on to a different topic in next week's offline lesson. That's going to be writing to explain. Related to analysis but slightly different. You'll have a task to do for the next 2 weeks. Then when we're online again, I'm going to give you a challenge which will test how well you manage to write your explanatory texts. Okay, that's it. It's been a long video, and if you've watched the whole thing, well, massive respect. Thank you very much. You guys stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next video.